Welcome to Conversations with Deborah, a bi-coastal dialogue heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com, a new, well, not new anymore, about a year, but it's an internet platform.
Innovative.
Innovative, zooming shows to you from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's heard all over the world. Basically, I'm concentrating in New York, California, South Carolina, New Jersey, and other places that might want to go on. And just, email me at malcolmpresents@gmail.com. Anyway, hey, what's happening?
Hey, how are you, Malcolm? How are you today?
I'm okay. Each night before I go to sleep, I worry about you because the big news.
You are so sweet. My name is Deborah Manning. I'm a native Southern California. Used to be, of all things, a news reporter for in Los Angeles, San Diego, and actually worked for National Public Radio for quite a number of years. At any rate, I moved to South Carolina with my husband, and about 6.5 years ago. And I got to tell you, have we got weather? Whoa, we got weather. Yes, we have weather.
Yeah, big news over here is I listen to the National Weather Forecast, and they say every day for the last at least 5-6 days, tornadoes in the Midwest going east from Texas, torrential rain, hurricane winds, and tornadoes. I've never heard of this before.
Well, it's usual for the Midwest to that band of intense weather coming across, generally starting in the Gulf of Mexico and then starting its way on down across from Texas to Alabama, the Midwest, and then it comes all the way across here to South Carolina. And the interesting thing about it is, of course, being a Southern California lady, I was so used to earthquakes. Now, we never had any idea when the earthquakes would come. Here, we know when tornadoes are going to be coming, and there is this warning system, which we very much appreciate. Although I must say that my cats don't appreciate it because it is a screeching sound that comes through, but they're trying to wake you up in the middle of the night. But we've been able to, since we're up in Greenville, South Carolina, we're in the top part of the state, within 50 miles of the North Carolina border. And fortunately, we are butt up against the Blue Ridge Mountains, which actually is the Eastern Continental Divide. So many of the storms are basically sheared off so that it doesn't impact us. But I have to tell you, when these tornadoes come in, Now, fortunately, the house that we purchased 6.5 years ago has a basement. So we, of course, are the favorite people here in our neighborhood. And of course, we open up our house to the neighbors because we have a safe spot downstairs and what have you.
Are you actually getting neighbors that are coming in?
They're calling us and saying, and basically we've kind of nominated ourselves as being kind of the neighborhood weather captains. And of course, I'm a weather junkie. And thanks to the internet, people like Jim Cantori, who's the head guy over at the Weather Channel, actually responded to my text when I asked, what app do you use to be able to put on the air? And sure enough, he gave me the app. And so you can follow along and you can see exactly the wind speeds. You can see if there is a tornado starting. There was tornadic activity 2 days ago, just south of us, beyond Columbia in the lowland. We're considered to be in the uplands, but in the low country, they had unbelievable amounts of tornadic activity. And as these storms come through, and of course they're in flat land, they just rev up and just tear things apart. Of course, the other issue, well, like in Southern California, many people living in mobile homes, and these mobile homes just they can't stand up to winds 100+ miles an hour and what have you. So it's been interesting. We were told, in fact, I'm looking out my office window here, and we were told that would be a fairly quiet day. And once again, thanks to my weather applications that I have on here, it's not going to be a quiet day. It's colder. In fact, we're actually going to have a freeze warning tonight, which is very unusual. But normally here in South Carolina, we'll get freeze warnings all the way up until April the 15th to April the 20th. So fortunately, all of my plants are going to be getting a little raincoat and a a little bit of a muffler around them so that they can survive the 32 and 28-degree weather coming into tonight.
That's kind of chilly for
A little bit.
for for, uh, for spring weather.
Yeah, a little bit. But it's funny because the neighbors here, and it used to be in Southern California that you really could depend upon neighbors. And when we moved out 6.5 years ago, we were noticing that there was just this situation where people really weren't communicating with one another. Here in South Carolina, it's a whole different situation. It reminds me so much of Southern California in the 80s and the 90s. So we do have a very cohesive neighborhood here. It's a working class neighborhood. So we have all different types of people here, all different races, religions, what have you, but we all band together. Why? Because we have to. Period. It's the American way. We got to do it.
I think a clue to what makes a neighborhood, what doesn't make a neighborhood, is whether people are longtime residents of a neighborhood or they transient. A lot of the problems with Southern California, what happened in I think that the years that you were here, or the latter part of the years, is people became transients. They weren't, they're a little, well, like me, but except I've been living here, like 45 years already. So I consider myself an Angelino. But, people who are living there 2-3 years from other places, this is not their town. So they don't get friendly, they come here later on in life. Whether it be, for work or for maybe for retirement, or be by the ocean. So they didn't grow up. I think where you grow up, where you spent your youth and your college years, are really the town that you like. Even for me, which basically I still consider, even though I've been living here longer than New York, I still consider myself a New Yorker. I still consider myself born in Brooklyn, and the only thing I have left of Brooklyn is sort of my some of my accent.
There you go. You still have the accent, my dear.
Right. Sometimes when I watch My Fair Lady,
yes,
and the Rex Harrison plays the part of the linguist or knows the accent, and he identifies them. Identifies people by the way they speak, and I'm sure that if he spoke to me, he would say, I know it's Coney Island, but I don't know whether it's east or west. I think it's the west side of Coney Island.
There you go. He probably would be able to pinpoint it.
Right.
So,
I'd love to do a show with that. Someone who knows accents. I don't know if you know anyone.
I don't know. We could probably check around. It's funny because people ask me about my accent, and they said, well, you definitely have a Southern California accent. I'm not really quite sure what that means, except that, of course, my Southern California friends say, well, have you gotten used to the Southern drawl? And I said, what Southern drawl? Of course, sometimes you cannot identify what in the world a real true Southerner is saying, because they have quite the Southern drawl. And it has been funny, because people have asked me to go pick them up in certain places, and they have to repeat the place that I'm supposed to go. And I finally said, would you please just write it down? I'm so sorry. I can't understand what you're saying.
Or spell it. I think I told the story. This was before I lived here, so it's probably like in the mid-70s.
Sure.
And I was driving cross country from actually Los Angeles to New York. Okay. And we got into a car accident in Highway 10. I think it was Odessa, Texas.
Oh my.
And we got rear-ended by a sheep truck.
Oh my.
And for some reason, I understand they don't usually do it, but the Texas Rangers stopped. I guess they were passing by. But he started talking like he sounded like he had a wad of cotton in his mouth.
Yeah.
I'm not tell what happened now, Diana. And I said, excuse me. And he, well, I said that.
I know.
And what's funny is that when I talked, and I'm directly out of New York, and I was excited, so I spoke faster, he didn't understand what I was saying.
There you go.
So I had to slow up, and I had to slow up, and he had to speed up a little bit and but it was like I felt like telling him, it's like Churchill said, we're two countries separated by a common language.
There we go.
It's like when the Brits speak to the Americans, it's a different language, even though it's the same words.
That's true.
But anyway, getting back to the weather, we've been I keep a, as a look on the national weather before I
Mhm.
go to sleep because I want to know how you're doing.
Thank
Uh,
you.
but it's all filled with the horror stories, what's happening, and showing the not so much in South Carolina, but the in Texas, all the tornadoes hitting and
Yeah.
the houses, and I mean, luckily fatalities have not been that great, but of
Yeah.
course, if it affects you, it's great. But you hear like 4 or 5 people dying, a lot of the elderly
Yeah.
who get stuck. But it
Well,
seems it's more and
it-
more. And as a matter of fact, you should be getting a calm now for a few days. But I hear there's a new front coming in.
yeah, there is. What's interesting though, that really makes you realize, uh, and I think perhaps it was because of the situation with COVID, or maybe it was just endemic here in South Carolina and the South itself. Hundreds of people are coming out and helping those individuals who have lost their homes to clean up things, to take the trees down that are blocking driveways, what have you. The stories that we have down in South Carolina of complete strangers, hundreds of people coming out and helping people. It's makes you realize once again the commonalities that we have as Americans. And I think that's one of the things that we need in our neighborhood here. We make sure that we have met each and every person up and down the neighborhood. In fact, actually within about a 2-mile radius of things, because once again, we need to stick together. And I do think that that attitude we really need now, especially now. One of the things I do want to say, because Malcolm and I used to work together, and we did a radio show called Real Money with my late husband. And one of the things I do want to indicate to people, because I have been contacted by a couple of folks, please start to cinch down. We are on our way to a major recession. And one of the things that you need to do is to stash the cash and to make sure that you have available monies available. Interestingly enough, let me put my glasses on because this actually just came on out, but it looks as though in terms of world food prices, it's up an astounding 34%. Part of it is because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But the situation is this, that for normal people like you and me and many of the folks that are watching the program here, you need to start to cinch things down. And if you need to go ahead and make sure you have, I know this sounds crazy, but lots of canned beans, lots of canned rice and what have you. And I'm not trying to sound, um, uh, conspiratorial or what have you, but I think we just need to be very, very practical. And we, at this point right now, are cinching down ourselves. We've really cut down on any type of our shopping. We're down to, as I've mentioned before, 1 tank of gas per month. We'll probably go now to 1 tank of gas per every 6 to 8 weeks, because the gasoline prices, despite the fact that President Biden has released oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the gas prices here are still staying in the high 3s and the low 4s. What are your gas prices there in Southern California?
It's close to 6 for
Yeah.
regular.
Yeah. So I mean, it's tough for average people to be able to afford things. And
Well, there's so many things happening. Like what people didn't realize that Ukraine
mhm,
provided, like, I think 60-70% of the wheat products
yeah,
and
40%.
corn.
Yeah. Mhm,
So that's not being produced.
yeah.
Aside from the fact that in our country, with the fires and the rains and the droughts,
Yeah.
a lot of our produce is not being is being destroyed. Uh, what happened just recently, the bird flu,
Mhm,
like there are millions and millions of eggs and chickens that are destroyed. So the
yeah.
egg prices went up by about 30%. I mean, my wife complains or tells me about that when she goes shopping.
Yeah.
So lots of things which we have absolutely no control over.
Well, it's interesting in South Carolina. It's a small enough, and as I say, I'm an ex-news reporter, and I guess I'm getting back into it again. I got a chance to meet with the commissioner of the agriculture department this last Monday, and we were talking about the situation with fertilizer and what South Carolina is going to do, and I hope that California is going to do, is start to really self-source fertilizer. And I know what South Carolina is doing, according to the commissioner, is he's talking with a variety of different fertilizer companies to be able to bring some of those resources in through the ports of Charleston and in through the ports of Wilmington, These are critical types of things. The other thing that's very interesting about South Carolina, and I think it's the same also with California, although you really would notice it because of the area that you're living right now, Malcolm. But in terms of our area, more than 60% of our state is rural with farms and forestry. And as a result, what's happening is that all of the farming that is being done here in South Carolina, it makes up a $50 billion of the state budget, which is close to 9–10% of the overall state budget. What you're starting to see now are many people going to the local farms and doing all of their buying there, and really starting to ignore the Walmarts and the Food Lions and the Lidls and the Ivies and what have you. They're going into local markets. Completing the thought that I had about cinching down, if you have credit card debt, please don't utilize all your cash to get rid of the credit card debt. You need to stay cash flush. It's very, very important. Stay cash flush and go ahead and start to pay down some of those credit card bills. But for heaven's sakes, don't use all of your money to get rid of the credit card bills, because the problem is going to be that you need to have the money. The banks don't need to have the money.
But it's a catch-22 now with the credit cards. Most credit cards, I don't know what percentage, but say about 90% are rate adjustable. When the rate goes up, they can raise you. It's not a locked-in rate. Like, you know, I have a student loan for my sons, but that's federally guaranteed, and I forget it's 5.9, so they can't raise that, aside from the fact that we're not paying it now. But most of the credit cards can go up. So if you're paying like 7–8%, which a lot of them are, right, or actually 12–13%.
Well, they're higher than that, my dear. I've got them at 29%.
But when the rate goes up and they just raised it by 2.5%, the Fed did, and supposedly next time around it's going to go up another at least 2.5%. Your credit cards are going to go up. What I have been doing is where I can is transferring the
balance transfers are
the balance transfer where there's no credit for the next
no interest.
No interest for the next a year or so. And then you start paying, then you notice how the rate your balance goes down. And not to take all the money out, but try to pay it off while you still have 0% interest.
But my suggestion is exactly what you're doing. Every one of the people who are listening to this broadcast right now need to do it immediately, because I'll tell you, those balance transfers are going to start to dry up. And once again, why is that? Because the Fed is continuing to print more money. That is inflationary. Secondarily, they've already shown their colors, which says they're going to be raising interest rates at least 0.5%, and they could be doing it 0.5% every single time they meet. So once again, they're tightening. Although they're flooding the market with money, they're still going to be tightening. So take advantage of those balance transfers, folks, immediately to get that offloaded. And then the next area is, please, for heaven's sakes, the lower balances that you have on your credit cards, pay those puppy dogs off first. Pay them off first. Very, very important. And you'll get ahead, because once again, this is one of the ways that I know that my late husband and I would advise people, normal everyday people, because you have a lot more power than you have any idea, but you've got to be able to protect your family. We all know that.
Yeah, so. And don't buy more than you can afford. I mean, like if people buying cars, I say, gee, I like this big car with all these added things. Get what you need for the transportation.
Yeah.
People
we're down to one. We used to have 2 cars, and I was worried by simply going with 1 car that I was going to be impeding my freedom. Well, forget that. We're fine with 1 car, for heaven's sakes. And it's those type. And I don't want to talk about lowering our standard of living and what have you, but there's some very odd things that are going on here. I watched the former President Biden ignoring our current President Joe Biden, and I felt very, very sorry for Joe Biden. But more than that, during that press conference, I was angry that a former president would ignore the current president of the United States. Once again, we're on a world stage, and people are watching the way that our president is being treated. And I didn't appreciate that. Once again, I'm an independent voter. I tend to be conservative because that's just the way things are. But I was very upset with the way Obama treated Joe Biden. And I just there's no place for that kind of rudeness. There really isn't.
Well, I will listen to Fox News or any of the other newses, and
Mhm.
you wouldn't be so upset with Obama. You'd be upset by there's no unity in any of the government. How can I explain? It was like in sports. I was listening to Magic Johnson
Mhm.
talk about the Lakers and how that there was no esprit de corps
Yeah.
with the Lakers, how different teams would come into their stadium and more or less dance on them and congratulate themselves and belittle the team.
Yeah.
This is what I feel sometimes the rest of the world is when they listen to the bickering between the Republicans and Democrats.
Mhm.
We're not getting together to be proud of the country.
Thank you.
They're still, the Democrats are still going, picking on the Trump era. The Republicans are every time are knocking the Biden and saying, outrageous things. Some are true and some aren't true.
Mhm.
But what I think we should change your, when you say and you're registered, you're an independent voter.
Mhm.
I'm not an independent voter. I'm not a Republican voter. I'm not a Democratic voter. I'm an independent thinker.
Yeah.
Because there's certain things that I listen to, and I basically because I do several shows that I listen to that I agree with. Sometimes I agree with some of the things that Republicans are saying that we're not doing.
Absolutely.
I mean, more likely, I agree with Democrats, but some of the Democratic things I don't see why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, no, that's not right. I'm not a block thinker.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is, again, an independent thinker. So I'm not an independent voter. I'm an independent thinker because there's some, and the thing is, there are no independent politicians anymore. They vote, take a look at the votes, whether it be in the House or whether it be in the Senate. I mean, it's sort of like they're following the leader. And
Well,
that upsets me to
don't-
no end.
Yeah, I don't understand, for example, the situation with Disney. Disney, I've absolved myself, I've sold all of my stock in Disney, and it's actually, I guess, part of my protest against this woke situation. They're very upset about the newly passed Florida law, which they say can't say gay or something or other. All that Florida law did was to say that we are not going to be talking about sex and gender transference and LBGTY XYZ to kids that are 5 years old from kindergarten to third grade. That's what it basically says. What I don't understand at this point right now is I don't understand how Disney is listening to a very, very small minority of people who are saying that you need to fight back on this law. It's harming the gay and the transgender community. Well, that's baloney. And the problem is going to be at this point right now that you've awakened, the woke culture has awakened a sleeping tiger, and that sleeping tiger is parents and even people like me who unfortunately I was not able to have kids. But when we're impacting sex and talking about sex to kidlets, and we've had this conversation before, Malcolm, let kids be kids. But Disney right now is funded by parents, by grandparents who send their kids and their grandkids on wonderful Disneyland and Disney World vacations. And those people are going to say, "Fangul to you," not going to be doing it anymore. I don't understand why these corporations seem to think that the tail is wagging the dog. The dog is now waking up, waking up.
If you watch Peter Pan, the old Peter Pans,
Yeah.
I always question whether he was gay or not.
I didn't care.
I don't care, but as I
Who
got older,
cares?
but he was very effeminate.
But it's fine.
I know,
You know
but
what?
the question that I have, number one, I think kids under the third grade couldn't give diddly squat.
No.
But the thing is, if a kid is interested in a doll, you don't say, no, that's not right. I know for whatever reason, I wasn't interested in dolls. Everything was.
And for some reason, I was interested in Tonka trucks. My parents did not have their hair on fire. Okay, I was considered to be once again a tomboy. What were they going to do? These days, if I was growing up now, they turned me into a guy. I'm happy being a lady.
Well, the question is, I don't think you know, I don't know what percentage of kids or the population have any questions. Or yes, there are a group of kids, there are a group of people, and I've spoken to them. I used to do a show, a gay and lesbian show. It's one of my first radio shows.
Sure.
And my host was the name of Karel Boulet, and he was gay, and but he only wanted to talk about the positive things about being gay, the positive things they did. But anyway, we had people on the show that didn't know their orientation. And in fact, we had one guy, I remember that when I met him, he was probably like in his mid-30s, and he, was, I know at this time he was married to a guy, but I met him. He was like a linebacker for college football, I think Ohio State. He was like about 6'2", 6'3", 250 pounds, but built.
Yeah.
And it seems like, coming from a very religious household, and they didn't talk about being gay or being straight. He said, but when he was in high school, when he was in college, he didn't have any feeling for girls, for women. He didn't, and he was too timid to think about feeling for men, but he knew that women didn't excite him, which for me was sort of like, what?
I know.
I couldn't understand that. But eventually he got married. And he had children, but he said there was no joy in it. And I forget one time, I don't know how he got it, but he got into a gay relationship. And he said all of a sudden there was an epiphany.
Yeah. That
this was me. Now all of a sudden, the veil was lifted.
And that's fine. But I don't think that straight individuals should be vilified because of the fact that they're straight.
No,
and I think at this point right now, Disney is doing that. A number of different companies are doing it. Coca-Cola is doing that. It's absurd. We are made up of all different kinds of people. Just because I'm straight and just because I'm white, that should not be a crime. And yet, once again, I think it's a very, very small minority, which is now, I got to tell you, many people are starting to wake up. I have friends across the country and across the world, as you do as well. And they're basically saying, okay, all right, we're going to stop being polite here. We're going to be pushing back and pushing back hard. I mean, Disney's going to feel it, because I'll tell you, parents and grandparents are not going to be subsidizing Disney stuff because they're fed up with this crap. Pardon my language.
Well, what I just heard was, and I don't know how true it is, and I don't know, that they were going to do away with designating sex on birth certificates. It's no longer male or female.
Oh, Lord.
And
how do you feel about that?
I think it's weird.
Thank you. Bravo.
I mean, I could see that this. Well, again, there's some abuses, in men and women. Female and men's rooms. And I remember for whatever reason, there's always a back. You go to a concert. You go to a concert, and there's always a line in the women's room.
Yep. No
line in the men's room.
Let me tell you a very, very quick story. Okay.
Yeah.
In my past life, and I still am, but I was a private investigator, and I was able to get my PI's license strictly because of the fact I was investigative news reporter in Los Angeles. All right. I was on a particular case and was in Los Angeles and was reviewing a particular case. And I excused myself and said, I need to go to the restroom. And the woman said, oh, it's right down the hall and blah, blah, blah. So I went down to the restroom, and she'd handed me a key. And I used the key to open up the women's restroom. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I have got to go to the bathroom. I looked over and, well, there's the men's room. That's fine. Go over. I opened up. The men's room opened up. I went on into a stall, into the very back stall, in case a man came in, what have you. I did my duty. Well, interestingly enough, the restrooms were right next to the Israeli consulate. And a couple of gentlemen walked in. and they're chatting away and they're speaking, Israeli, whatever it would be. And all of a sudden you can hear this silence. And of course, I'm wearing my bright red stiletto heels
Right.
in my younger days.
And you're
And
about
they,
6 foot.
yes, and they were looking and saw the stiletto heels, and all of a sudden they both left. And of course, I finished my business and washed my hands and what have you, and walked on out. When I walked out, there was a semicircle of Israelis, soldiers, each one of them pointing an Uzi at me as I opened up the door. And they looked at me and I said, when you gotta go, you gotta go, okay? And I busted myself through and down the hallway. And I said, this is the wrong key. This goes to the men's room. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Manning. Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, a long time, I'm going back to the 70s, when,
Yep.
as I say, the women's room, there's generally a big line. And as you know, if you have to go, you have to go.
Gotta go.
And you can't wait on the line. Women used to come into the men's room, and like, generally, if they would say, they would talk to a guy that was waiting online and say, excuse me, could you tell the guys that I have to use it? And most of the time, guys are standing at urinals.
Mhm.
And with their back, you can't see anything except the guy,
Yeah.
the guy's back. So, the guy would come in and say, excuse me, there's a woman that wants to go in to use. And the stalls, you have the doors locked.
That's right.
So I don't see any reason why they can't design bathrooms to be unisex, where if you go in, the woman doesn't have to pass the urinals. The urinals are, in a little private place.
Mhm.
So if they want to go into the urinal, if they want to go to the stalls, they go to the stalls. They don't have to pass it.
Well, I have to say, especially in sporting events, I think that's probably an excellent idea. Because, I got to tell you, when you got to go, you got to go. And the lines for women, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
That's a perfect line, because we got to go.
Oh, we do?
Our
Oh,
time is
you're
up.
kidding me.
Anyway, do me a favor, take care,
I will.
be cautious.
And
'cause
we will.
I ain't used to tornadoes.
Yeah, there's something, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I'm
Great.
oriented towards earthquakes, but thank God, I think the only earthquake that I've been through or a major is like I think 94?
Yeah.
Where they had a 6.7 in Los
Yep.
Angeles. That's the only one I've been living at over 40 years. Occasionally I'll feel my room shaking. I'm not sure whether it's a room shaking or I'm getting a stroke.
Oh, gee, money Christmas. Now, listen, they said if you live through 75, that you will live a very, very long time. And I think you're going to live a long time, my dear.
Well, when I get to 75, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Send my love to Fish.
And my love to Anna. Bye-bye.
Bye.